whoa, Grandpa, tell me about the good old days.
Okay, so we're going to talk about the good old days for
I should not make that a
for
regular
about
part
10
of it.
minutes or until we lose half the stream. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. But yeah, the good old days. And
So you are a geeky geezer. Tell me about what it was like to be a geeky geezer back in the day, Boomer.
well, I wanted to bring up something that you had brought up earlier the week. I was on what's his face? Daniel Herron's Birdman, soundtracks of Birdman
Soundtracks
stream
with
this week.
Birdman.
And we were watching Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, and I was pointing out that J.K. Rowling was pretty brilliant because the monster in that movie was in the book too, because I read the book, was a basilisk.
Yep.
And I was like,
yeah.
That's not the go-to petrifying monster. It's usually Medusa. And I said, I remembered a game for the old Atari 800 computer called Archon. Now, many of you may not even know that Atari made computers back in the day.
Yeah.
They were kind of getting done with game consoles, and they said, I don't know if this was after the big crash, like when they made about 1 million copies of E.T. and nobody bought them because it was terrible, and so they moved on into computers, and much like the Commodore 64, its competitor, kids would often, tell their parents, "Hey, I need the computer for school." Yeah, that's it, and they would get it because they wanted to play games on it.
Yeah.
And one of these games was a game called Archon. And it was made by a company, you may have heard of it, called Electronic Arts.
Yep.
And back in the old days, Electronic Arts was a much different beast than it is today. The games that were being made were usually, I think, made by one person, okay? And then, or like a couple. And you didn't have these huge teams back then. And
if I can make a geezer comment.
Sure.
Those old games had a charm about them. And I'm speaking as someone that has a nostalgic connection to them, not just, a modern hipster, a quirk about them. They were some pretty damn good games. Somebody posted a meme or whatever you'd call it that was like a beautiful painting of a dragon and then like a, pixelated, 32-bit dragon. And making a comparison. And I'm like, I'll tell you, I played games with those pixels, and in my mind, they were just like the painting. You used your imagination.
You did. It's like when you would have an action figure, and maybe the action figure didn't represent. Like I have an action figure of Indiana Jones. Okay, it doesn't look exactly like Harrison Ford, but close enough. I use my imagination. Okay, same thing for video games.
Let me tell you something.
Those old video
I'm
games.
sorry. I'm going to interrupt you, and I'm going to get off on a slight tangent. But when you talk about action figures, you get me talking about Star Wars action figures. You look at that original Farm Boy Luke Skywalker with the goofy lightsaber that was, you'd pull out of his arm. Okay, silly as that seems. There are now people on Etsy, and because I've had so much to drink, I can't even remember his name. You guys that follow me, I'll do a video about him. But he's got this 3D printed, and you can buy from him on Etsy. You can pull out the lightsaber, and in its place, you can put a gun. So that hand is not wasted. That's the kind of thing that we're talking about here, right? The action figure that was just not articulated, that was just not useful, that was very but modern day people are finding ways to work around that. Sorry, Agent Boomer, go ahead with what you were saying.
I was thinking I that brought up the Indiana Jones figure I had where he was dressed in the certain German socialist group uniform.
Yes,
and he had like the power arm that would flip up, I believe.
Yep.
But you couldn't actually stick anything in his hands, I don't think, or at least not in the one hand because it was a fist, right? Yeah.
Let me tell you, that action figure line, completely missed opportunity. They could have put out a generic, National Socialist figure to be a villain figure and an army builder. And not only could you have used it with Indiana Jones, you could have used it with G.I. Joe.
Anything.
Or whatever. Yeah. That was a huge missed opportunity.
There were many missed opportunities back in the action figure. I always thought they did a good job with the Star Wars figures, but those
guys, fans are doing the best work. Go check Etsy out because people are putting out, almost commercial quality figures of all kinds of things you can't even imagine. Hell, if you are a 3D printer, you can download action figures and print them out yourself these days.
Yeah.
Sorry, tangent. Had a lot to drink. Forgive me.
Stuff happens. We had a lot to talk about earlier, but the neat thing is that Archon was sort of like a modern version of chess, because you had the checkerboard and you had all these characters on it, but I don't think they moved in exactly the way chess worked. And when you could play it against a computer, you could play against another player, 2-player, and when both characters would meet up on the board, you would take control of that character and start duking it out in like a little arena, and you were in control of that character. So it wasn't like, knight takes pawn or something like that. It was like you're actually fighting it out, yourself. And here's some of the characters from the board. On the light side, you had a Valkyrie, a Golem, a Unicorn, a Djinn, Wizard, Phoenix, Unicorn, and a Valkyrie.
Okay, yeah, here, aren't you?
I'm referencing Wiki, C64
Wiki. Because your memory isn't that good.
My memory ain't that good. Okay, no. I remember the Basilisk. That was about it. And then there was the dark side you could play as, and you would get like a Banshee, a Troll, a Basilisk, a Shapeshifter, Sorceress, Dragon, Manticore, Goblins. Yeah, on the dark side, Goblins are the pawns, and on the light side,
this is exactly the reason that I say that Aged Boomer is my brother from another mother, because when he mentioned this during Soundtrack with Birdman stream, he said exactly what I was thinking, because I'm watching this and it's the Basilisk and so forth, and I thought of Archon. And then he talks about it, and I'm like, oh my God, he is saying exactly what I'm thinking. Get out of my head. Okay. Atari 2600, let me tell you this. Mm-hmm. Okay. Little Troy, born in 71. I don't know what year Atari 2600 came out, but, I used to go to the arcade. I used to go to Woolworth on Wednesday afternoons. My grandmother would take me to the lunch counter, and we'd have bacon, lettuce, and tomato sandwiches.
Oh, that's nice.
And then she'd give me $4 to go play Space Invaders.
Oh.
And then when I saw that Atari 2600 was coming out with Space Invaders, I wanted it so bad. And I told Santa, and I told my mom, and I told my grandma, I'm like, I know it's expensive. I know. But if I got no other toy this year, Atari 2600, that's what I want, right? Well, I said Atari. I didn't know it was Atari 2600 then, because it was the only Atari that was out at the time. And it was so expensive back in 1970, whatever it was. Oh, yeah. My mother, my grandmother, and my uncle all put in together to buy it for me. And they bought me the base unit, and they bought me Space Invaders. And let me tell you, if those were the only games I got, I'd have been the happiest camper. But of course, over time, they'd get me other, cartridges and games, and heck, I could almost do a stream about that separately, but yeah, I love that Atari 2600, and I played it to death. And let me just say that those controllers, those joysticks, they were made to take some frickin' punishment, because I never went through one, and I was incredibly hard on them. Mm-hmm. Another story. So in high school, freshman year in high school, I took a class in computers, and I'm so old that a class in computers in high school meant learning basic language programming.
Right.
And once I learned that, I took a Twist-a-Plot book and turned it into a text adventure game for neat. Commodore 64. And it was a Star Wars. Well, no, I take that back. There was going around, and people would make copies of discs. There was a Star Wars text adventure that I had gotten from somebody. I took a Star Trek choose your own adventure and turned it into a choose your own adventure using basic languaging, wrote it on a disc and shared it with some friends. And I don't know if it got any traction or not. Who knows? This was way before the internet.
It could be out there online somewhere. You never know.
I'll have to do a search. That's a good point.
What if it got shared around and then it just became? I'm curious though.
If that's true, thumbs up. I don't care. I don't need any credit for it. I'm fired up about that.
So next week's topic could be choose your own adventure books. Okay.
Right?
Maybe not. Yeah. Okay. Maybe I'll dig one out and we could do a live thing. But yeah, I was just going to bring this up. I wanted to reminisce because it dawned on me and Troy that we are getting up there, and some of you younglings may not actually, or youngins, I should say. Let's not use younglings. May not remember.
No. Let's use younglings. I like that. Okay. It's very geeky. It fits our community. I think that's fair.
And basically, back in the day that people forget that Atari had a computer. And you know what? For the time, it was fairly sophisticated. And I got to play my own version of Space Invaders. It was called Deluxe Invaders. And it was actually short for Deluxe Space Invaders, which was the sequel that got released in arcades. And the difference between that,
I know exactly what you mean.
You shoot the aliens and they'd split in two.
Oh, God.
Remember that?
I hated that game, to be honest with you.